Continuing with the reading of Life Designs. And I will begin and read just a little bit of what I've read before, so we don't lose track of where we are. Daydreams and fantasies are a part of the constant activity of our all-awake self in the PST. Daydreaming and fantasizing are done in an awake and aware state. At times we intentionally focus on fantasy and daydreams, and we commonly think of those as the only times we're engaged in this activity. In actuality, this is a constant activity. It's this activity that generates our mood. Behind every mood is a fantasy or a daydream. If we stop and look behind the mood, we'll find a fantasy in which the mood is being portrayed. The words, circumstances, and expressions of the fantasy are promoting the mood being portrayed, and the mood floods into our daily experiences. Most of the time we notice the mood, but we rationalize it with something like, I feel this way because of some life circumstance I find myself in. We assign the mood to something outside of ourselves, and when we stop there and go no further, we are left feeling like a victim of our own moods. We do this because a great deal of our fantasy life is a mystery to us. It's a secret we're keeping from ourselves. It's working this way because we set up fantasies. We give them life by repeating them and being impressed by them over and over. Once a fantasy is alive and running, it'll run without your intentionally directing it. It becomes an auto-fantasy, and it just pops in through random associations, delivers its message, and promotes a mood. What is the mood of your life? Is not the mood the same thing as the quality of life? Mood is highly underrated as a focus of intentional living. It falls far behind getting money or food or a sense of importance. Yet all we ever are looking for in our waking hours is that mellow mood. The quality of feeling that colors everything with vibes of it's all right, everything is cool, and goodness is the general state of things. Hell yeah, I'll say mood is underrated. And if you think about it, daydreaming and fantasy are even more underrated. So here we are, walking around with our auto what-if fantasies running and promoting every kind of mood from bitter frustration to blissful appreciation. Unfortunately, we fantasize a lot about our fears and traps. We do this without even noticing. All we know is we feel anxious, edgy, and overwhelmed. We feel a general sense of struggle, and the mood is highly stressful. What we are seeing here is we are literally creating our stories, including our physical expressions, such as health, through our personal fantasies and daydreams. We fantasize that life is somehow terrifying, and we create a mood of danger and threat. This compounds stress in our bodies, and we get stress sick. Vicious cycle. How can you tell if your auto-fantasies are creating fear? Simple. Are you feeling a lot of fear? Bingo. Are you feeling discouraged, defensive, aggressive, or a great sense of pressure? These feelings point directly to auto-fantasies and the nature of those fantasies. Here's the point of the matter. It's not necessarily to probe deeply into the fear fantasies. They only need to be acknowledged. Once acknowledged, we can employ them as triggers to shift to intentional daydreaming. We already know how handy triggers are. Triggers are powerful shifters in the PST. We can learn, self-teach, to use our moods of fear to trigger us to intentionally fantasize about whatever lights our fire of peace, happiness, appreciation, and love. This is called re-triggering, to take an old pattern and use it to trigger a new one. In this way, the terrible feelings of hopelessness, discouragement, fear, and doubt become signals to shift the mind gears and begin to form intentional fantasies of goodness. In fantasy, there are no limits, so we can daydream in epic and mythical proportions. This is important because it's the epic and the legendary that most profoundly affect which meanings we choose to believe. Belief is a personal power behind all our magic, all our miracles, and our very perception of reality. The key is to register the moment you feel your mood turn south. This requires you to pay a particular kind of attention to yourself. It requires you to be more focused in the experiential senses. It requires you to become a skilled dreamer. When you first register a bad mood, you may feel a sense of immobility, paralysis, or being trapped in the mood. Turn your attention to the experiential sense of peace and begin with these words. Wouldn't it be cool if, and then fill the end with whatever comes up. These words can unstick you, as can the words, I'm so grateful for. The following is an example of a wouldn't it be cool fantasy that creates a mood in which bad feelings cannot abide. Wouldn't it be cool if today, all at once, a soft white light came up out of the earth and enveloped everything in a misty glow, and all of a sudden there was not a sound anywhere on the whole planet, and everyone stops what they are doing, and in the same instant everyone who is sleeping wakes up. It's quiet, and everyone somehow knows the same thing is happening to everyone else. There is a feeling of calm anticipation as we all begin to feel a sense of sanity, a sense of clarity, as if we were all waking up and shaking off a bad dream. We sense and know that all at once we've been healed of our spiritual illness, and we all sit down wherever we are, and we feel our freedom speaking to us, and we are all here. Something shifted, and we're all here at once in peace, and we know everything is going to be different now. And we look forward with the same calm anticipation of whatever awesome thing may come next. This is a small and brief example. The more rich, detailed, original, layered, visual, and involved a fantasy is, the quicker it will take on its auto activities or life. The more magical, mystical, and involved it is, the more life it will have in it. And you can begin with something you appreciate in your life and build the fantasy on that, or even just dwell in a reverie of the wonderful gifts in your own life story. This activity decreases the time spent in auto-fear fantasy, decreasing fearful moods and re-triggering fear, reassigning fear as a trigger, not as a mood to promote. Intentional daydreaming also increases the expressions of peace, beauty, inspiration, vitality, and the power of intentional creation. Through our personal fantasy life, we can create auto-calm fantasies that promote a calm and mellow mood in which we can dwell whenever we choose. Then we can know that whatever lies along our path, we will approach it in a mood of peace and assurance. That is a high mood and a high quality of life. Exercise. Create a wouldn't it be cool if fantasy about your own life. You'll be surprised at how fast you can do this. Write this fantasy down and read it no less than 20 times. Memorize it. Go in at least once a month or whenever you feel like it, and alter it according to your new views. Repeated use of this technique will cause your auto-cool fantasies to kick in just at the mention of the words, wouldn't it be cool? At first you'll notice that you can get unstuck faster. Then you'll become more aware of specific triggers, which will soon become positive feedback signals to your whole system. Re-triggering unwanted patterns clears the thoughts, and with clarity comes increased consideration because you can see more. This increases understanding, and with increased understanding comes a higher sense of appreciation. This positive feedback system is a part of your psychological design, and you have access to it at any time. Shifting levers. Shifting levers are the shifters we use to change our views and to change our mood. These levers are the principles of reciprocal dynamics. These are the underlying principles of reciprocating relationship, and they reveal directions for exercising psychological freedom, the how-tos of creative thought. Focus of attention. Focus of attention is what we will be mastering here. What we give attention to, we give personal creative power to. This is a principle of reciprocal dynamics. Attention reciprocates creative energy. The relationship of attention creation as creative power is shared through association. What we give attention to, we create. What we associate with associates with us. What we create is simultaneously creating us as reflection of a possible aspect of ourself. What is reflecting through our individual creations is inseparable from our individual self. Therefore, the reflection is the creation of a possible self through giving attention to a particular possibility. Attention creates. Attention is action. When we shift attention, we are shifting something that is already in motion. There is a momentum of attention, and you feel this momentum when you just can't get your mind off of something. The patterns we are dealing with here are patterns of attention. We habitually pay attention to particular subjects, events, and points of view. It's easy to define what we habitually pay attention to because it's what we obsess about, worry about, and most consciously daydream about. These patterns have momentum. Take, for instance, discouragement. Discouragement is a pattern of focusing attention on hopelessness, fear, and doubt. Discouragement has the overwhelming sense of fear along with the trapped sense of hopelessness. This pattern shows how wretched life feels without hope, and how miserable life feels when there is a sense of no confidence, only a sense of no choice, no freedom, and impending devastation. These patterns have such a momentum that it takes seemingly enormous amounts of personal energy to shift attention away from them. If we step back from the situation and acknowledge that this discouragement we're feeling is a pattern of expression, and focusing on it creates a sense of misery and wretchedness, in that shift of acknowledgement alone, we free our attention and free ourselves from the trapped view. We create a new view. This is how attention creation works. The principle of receptivity exposure. In order to focus attention, we must shift our attention toward a subject and then zoom in or increase exposure to the subject. We are seeing more information, more details about the subject, therefore it is more exposed to our view. Our zoom lever is our personal use of receptivity. The more receptive or open we are, the more exposed we are. Exposure receptivity is a reciprocating relationship. If a subject is more exposed to me then I am instantly and equally more exposed to it. The more exposure, the greater the influence, and vice versa. So to focus attention is to become more receptive. To be more receptive is to be more exposed. And to be more exposed is to be more influenced and influential. The more you are exposed to a pattern, the more affected you are going to be by it, and the more personalized it becomes. Trying to pretend a pattern doesn't exist is just exactly. Trying to pretend a pattern doesn't exist is just a sideways way of giving the pattern attention and associating with the pattern in a self-deceptive way. This is the basis of self-sabotage patterns. Attention is attention, and denial is a subtle form of focus. To deny something is actually to focus attention on it through resistance. Resistance has the same relationship to exposure as receptivity. Resisting something is another form of exposure to the thing we're trying to deny. We don't shift attention by denying or resisting a pattern. We shift away by disassociation. To disassociate, you must acknowledge the pattern for what it is and choose to not utilize it or associate yourself personally with it. Disassociation means you will no longer be using a pattern for self-imaging. Shifting out of that pattern is highly affected by the momentum it has in your life. The repetition principle of momentum. The repetition principle of momentum states that the magnitude of a pattern's The repetition principle of momentum states that the magnitude of a pattern's momentum is directly related to the repetitions of the pattern and high-impact impressions. High-impact impressions is an impression that is multi-layered and initiates with a magnitude of exponential repetition, creating an instantaneous auto-reaction. A good example of high-impact impressions is food poisoning, because the all-over body pain and retching combined with the psychological pain of shock, the effects of the experience are intense and lasting. A person will feel an instant auto-repulsion and flashback at the very mention of the food that is associated with the poisoning. So, momentum is directly related to the number of repetitions of the pattern, how long the pattern has been in use, and the instant multi-repetition equivalent of high-impact impressions. We are usually unaware of the momentum a pattern has in our life until we attempt to change. The momentum of a pattern is quite simple, its tendency to show up. The momentum of a pattern is quite simple, its tendency to show up. Read that twice. When we initially start down a path that disassociates us from a deep pattern, the pattern can literally show up hundreds of times an hour in the personal mind space. We experience cravings, withdrawal, and continued expression of the pattern in this first phase. This is where many people give up the shift. It's not only because we see the pattern surfacing as some kind of failure on our part to change. We are usually totally unprepared for the power of the momentum because we've been flowing with the pattern. We've been coasting along unconsciously in an auto stream of attention. It's only when we begin to shift to a different direction that we become fully aware of the magnitude of influence this pattern has been having in our life. By understanding the phases of pattern shifting and how magnitude is related to repetition, we gain a clear directive for navigating pattern disassociation and new pattern integration. The first phase, or phase 1, of pattern shifting is the most intense and challenging phase. It's at this time that the pattern is showing up so frequently that it's like a constant stream, and we're getting greatly preoccupied with the pattern. It's as if there is no break in craving or the urge to continue repeating the old pattern. This time is usually marked by high anxiety and the irritability, in part due to the overall shock of the pattern's momentum. This is called momentum shock, and its impact can drive a person right to old ways if they're unprepared for it. This is a crucial time of change. It's helpful to have some sort of strategy for navigating this shock wave ahead of time. I have one I call the inhibitor strategy, and it's real simple. When I was first disassociating from anger, I had a hell of a time just calming down. It could take hours. I hated it even coming up. I hated being triggered, and it seemed real hopeless at first. Then one day I was kind of watching myself from the outside, and I caught a glimpse of something very promising. I noticed that the anger was coming in waves. It would peak, and I would feel completely pissed off again. After a while, I noticed myself slipping into waves of relief and calm in between the anger peaks. In one of the calm periods, I was able to think better and started to question how I could use the waves to find my way out of something I just didn't want anymore. I was real sick of anger and the aggressive thoughts that choked my brain. So I put out the question, how can I stop the anger waves? This is what I found out. When the anger was peaking, I gave myself a set of questions to ask over and over that had a real effect, because they use one of the most powerful tools in the universe, and that is our ability to say no. No is the inhibitor. It is a universally understood signal, and in the PST, it is an absolute directive. Here are the questions. Do I want to express myself this way? Do I want to feel this way one more day, one more hour, one more minute? Do I want to spend any more of my attention, energy, life on this? I allow a firm and calm no to hang in my head after each question. And with each repetition, the no gets beefier and much more confident. This helped majorly in a couple of ways. First of all, just shifting my attention to the inhibitor questions takes my focus off the angry talk and feelings, so it interrupts the anger pattern and shortens the peak time. The practice of using the repetition of no set me free in a very real sense. The confidence that comes from being able to say no to things you don't really want is liberating for sure. The fact that it's repeatable and magnifies in power with repeated use is observable. I have come to love the word no and love saying no to things I no longer want. I also discovered re-triggering in this process, because now when I went off kilter and used anger, it turned into an opportunity to deconstruct that crap. So when I got angry, it began to trigger me to use the inhibitor, and my recovery time got better and better. As the waves of anger grew shorter and shorter, the waves of relief would elongate and stretch out. I use these times of relief from any ill mood to repeat positive affirmations. I take this time to integrate the new expressions of peace, calm, and ease. I repeat words and messages to myself that really ring a bell for me. I find words that have a genuine value and vibe for me, and I soothe myself with kind talk in these moments. To be kind is to be easy with ourselves and the others. To be able to ride out the momentum shock of the big changes in our lives, it is most powerful to be calm and to be kind. Take it easy with yourself and the others, and you'll emerge out of that first phase on top of the wave and in one piece. You'll know you're nearing the end of phase 1 because the old pattern will noticeably fade and diminish in momentum. The new pattern will begin to show up more often, and re-triggering will be happening. The next phase of pattern shifting is the Jekyll and Hyde phase. This is where the old and the new patterns are both presenting. After riding out the initial shock wave, it can feel real discouraging when the old shit keeps showing up, even when there's been long breaks in between. Just know this, that discouragement can get triggered throughout the beginning of any big shift. Use it. Re-trigger discouragement. Whip out your big fat no and disassociate from the pattern of discouragement while you're deconstructing whatever else it is you're leaving behind. This will make the whole process go faster and faster, and when you know how to watch the momentum, you'll actually witness your old self die out and the new sides of you that have been distant strangers before now will become obvious and consistent. There comes a time when you know down to your bones that you are done with old ways. Oh, they're available, and they always will be, but you know how you got out, and you know how to not go back. This is the end of phase 2, and the beginning of the final phase of pattern shifting.